ขอต้อนรับกลับสู่ Museum Forum นะครับหัวข้อต่อไปในช่วงนี้นะครับจะเป็นการนำเสนอของวิทยากรนะครับในชื่อหัวข้อว่าการศึกษาภายในและที่ก้าวออกและทั้งภายในและทั้งที่ก้าวออกไปนอกกำแพงพิพิธภัณฑ์นะครับกรณีศึกษาของประเทศสิงคโปร์นะครับผมNow we are moving to the next keynote address titled Education Within and Beyond Museum Walls, a Singapore Case Study. And our keynote speaker is Mr.Alvin Tan, Assistant Chief Executive, Policy and Community, National Heritage Board of Singapore. Please welcome Mr. Alvin Tan.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, good afternoon everyone. First I'd like to begin my presentation by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this museum forum. And I also like to apologize for distracting you by my walking around. Since young, I've always been very hyperactive, and to make me stand behind the rostrum like that to deliver a 45-minute lecture is really torture for me. So thank you to the organizer for acceding to my request for a cordless mic. I'll begin my presentation. It looks, can you all see? Is it clear? Right. Yeah. Okay, maybe the next slide. Okay, this would be better. Right. I'll begin by sharing a bit about the National Heritage Board before I go into the presentation proper, which is about Singapore's museum and heritage education framework as well as our strategies. So the National Heritage Board is actually a statutory board under our Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth. It was set up all in 1993 with three main roles. Firstly, we act as the custodian of Singapore's heritage in the sense that we seek to preserve and promote Singapore's heritage as well as our links to the rest of Southeast Asia, to Asia and the rest of the world. The second role that we perform is really we serve as an advisor to the Singapore government on all heritage matters. So if there's anything, any issues that crops up regarding heritage, for instance, like the demolition of a conserved house, a preserved house, they will come to the National Heritage Board for our inputs and our advice. But more importantly and more relevant to today's forum is really our role as an educator. So the National Heritage Board's role as an educator is really to promote public awareness. We also promote public appreciation and understanding of Singapore's heritage. There are four main areas of work that the NHB focuses on. One is really, we look at museum management. So we run the national museums in Singapore. And we also run the heritage institutions and a couple of other national level institutions. We also look at content creation, basically how we create content through curatorial work, through research. Increasingly important, we are also tasked with community engagement, which is how we engage the communities through our programs, through our activities. And finally, we are also tasked with the preservation of altogether our 72 national monuments, as well as providing conservation support for the national collection, which is on display at all our national museums. And in the area of museum management, just to quickly touch on, we actually have a total of 4 national museums. They are the National Museum of Singapore, the Asian Civilizations Museum, Peranakan Museum, and of course the Philatelic Museum. We also have 3 community heritage institutions that we take care of, and that's the Sun Yat-sen Nanyang Memorial Hall for the Chinese community, the Malay Heritage Center for the Malay community, as well as the recently opened Indian Heritage Center for the Indian community. And of course, we have a World War II interpretive center known as Reflections at Bukit Chandu. And to support all these national museums and heritage institutions, what we do have is the Heritage Conservation Center, which looks after about 250,000 artworks and artifacts which are on display at our national museums. But together with museum management, I think increasingly we are asked by the government and even expected of the public to do a lot of community engagement. And we do that not only through our museum programs, our museum activities, we also do that through 3 major festivals that we organize throughout the year and that are targeted at different audience segments. So every year during the school holidays, in the June period, what we do have is we organize the children's season that's targeted at children and families and students especially. And for the youths and working adults, what we have is the annual Singapore Night Festival. So it's like 2 weekends of celebration where there's a lot of visual displays, light installations across the arts and civic districts, and a lot of aerial performances, outdoor performances. And of course, we have the annual Heritage Festival, which is basically targeted at all segments of the population. And it brings a lot of our heritage programs out into the shopping centers, into the neighborhoods, and all that. So really out of the museum walls. And of course, we also happen to chair the Museum Roundtable. That's an association comprising more than, I think, 57 at last count, private and public sector museums. So we coordinate with them, we do a lot of programs together, and we do a lot of cross-marketing to encourage Singaporeans to visit the other museums other than the national museums. So this is our org chart. This is how we look like. There are 3 basic clusters in NHB. I take care of the policy and community clusters. So that basically covers education and outreach, as well as the community institutions. I deal with things like preservation of sites and monuments, heritage impact assessment, international relations, and conservation work. And then there's the other cluster, which deals with the remaining museums. And of course, the final cluster is really on corporate development, which takes care of all the hygiene issues like HR, finance, IT, and so on. Right. I thought before I go into my presentation, it's useful to provide a kind of an overview of the heritage and the museum landscape in Singapore. Every year, what our ministry does is it collates statistics from across the arts and the museum sector, and it publishes them online. So you can go to MCCY, which is the short acronym for our ministry. Every year, you just look for the arts and cultural statistics. The statistics that I'm showing you right now are for last year, 2016. We will be releasing the latest soon. I think towards October-November period. So again, it might be useful for the purpose of benchmarking in terms of total number of museum visitorships, community outreach, and so on. So if you look at the statistics here, generally, the number of museum visitorship in Singapore has been relatively stable at around close to 3 million. I think, our population is about maybe 5.7. So museum visitorship hovers around 3 million. But there's a spike in the year 2013, and that's because that's the year we made all our national museums free to Singaporeans and Singaporean permanent residents. So that explains the spike in 2013 where it crosses over the 3 million mark. And in 2015, there's another huge spike. And I think that could be attributed to the fact that 2015 was the year that Singapore celebrated its 50th birthday. We are a relatively young nation. And because of the 50th birthday celebrations and all that, then Singaporeans got very nostalgic and things like that. So they went a lot to the museum to learn about our history. It was also the year we opened 2 of our new national level museums. One is the National Gallery of Singapore. It's the largest museum right now. It's under our ministry. It actually displays all the artworks and artifacts of Southeast Asian art. So it focuses on Southeast Asian art, and that was also the year we opened our 3rd heritage institution, which is the Indian Heritage Center. So the combined number of visitorship went up quite high. In terms of visitors to NHB specific museums, which refers to the museums and the heritage institutions that are run and operated by the National Heritage Board, these are the figures. As you can see, we contribute roughly about 2.1 to 2.5 through the years. And again, 2013, you see the spike because of the free admission to Singaporeans and Singaporeans' permanent residents. And after that, again, 2016, we reached another peak, another record year of visitorship with close to 3 million visitors to our national museums. So in line with today's, the forum topic of today, when we see the museum visitorship going up, what we also notice is that the number of students visiting our museums have also gone up year on year. And every year there is a kind of an average increase of 10,000 students visiting our national museums. And these are purely students that come as school groups. So we do have arrangements with schools where they busk in students by cohorts to visit our museums. These figures do not include students or children who visit the museums with their families outside of these school visits. So if you think about it, the actual figures are much, much higher than what you see here. But for the purposes of keeping track of school-related or education-related programs, these are the figures. In addition to our top-line KPI, which is museum visitorship, which we have to track and report to our ministry, we have to report to the Ministry of Finance so that they'll give us either more budget or they'll cut our budget. What happens is that we also have to track and present on community outreach figures. That means when we travel our traveling exhibitions out into the shopping centers, into the neighboring districts, where we hold festivals that are off-site from the museums, we track the figures. So you see from 2012 all the way up to 2016, there has been a steady increase. There was a slight dip from 2011 to 2012 because there was a previous division in the NHB that was in charge of doing all these community outreach activities, but that one, because of some reorg, the function was actually placed under another division, which explains the dip. But increasingly, you can see right now, again, 2016, we have actually reached out to more than 6.5 million people. Okay, so that's the outreach figures. Now, having shared with you what we are about, the kind of work that we do, as well as sharing with you certain broad statistics about the museum and heritage landscape, I thought I'll share with you what exactly is NHB's education framework. Now, this is a three-pronged framework, which means it is supported by three different strategies. In the later slides, I will go into each of these individual strategies. I will also share with you some of the key initiatives that come under each of these strategies. But there are a couple of important things to note. One is that our education framework is totally aligned with our Ministry of Education's so-called desired outcomes of education. And I have to stress that that is very important. Basically, these desired outcomes of education are really the key attributes that our Ministry of Education hopes that every Singaporean would have when they finish studying. That means when they complete either their tertiary education or their secondary school education, our Ministry of Education hopes that they will become self-directed learners, they will be like active contributors, concerned citizens, and a confident person. Broad outcomes like these. So our educational framework is actually aligned with and supports these learning outcomes from our Ministry of Education. And one very conscious position that we took for all our educational strategies is that we wanted to make sure that we reach out to students at every significant milestone in their life. We call it the life journey as a student. So we hit them at preschool, we hit them at primary school, we hit them at secondary school, and we hit them at tertiary at the tertiary level. The reason is because we work well with the schools, with our Ministry of Education, and we sort of have a captive audience. But once they leave the school system, that means when they go out to work as working adults, when we do our visitors profile survey, we find that there's a drop. That means once they leave school, when they start working, perhaps because their work becomes more busy, they are busy starting a family, there's a drop in terms of people from this segment coming to the museum. But once they have families, they come back to our museums again. So that's something that we discover when we do our visitorship profiling. Right. So these are the three different strategies. So let me go on to share basically our first strategy, which is basically to promote our museum and our heritage resources, our heritage sites as learning resources that all the schools can actually tap on for their out of classroom lessons, you know, and things like that. This is a program that I think we started in 2014. It's called Singapore's Little Treasures. It comprises two main components. If you look at the picture here at the corner, it comprises a traveling trunk, and inside the traveling trunk there will be replicas or reproductions of items from our national collection. So it could be, like for this one, it could be a picture of the William Farquhar painting and some of the other artifacts that you see. So we actually developed this traveling trunk. We also have teaching resources to teach the teacher on how to use these trunks. What happens is that we also include, as part of the program, a 2-day training workshop for preschool educators and teachers. So they have to go through these workshops so that they know how to use these trunks, they know how to conduct lesson plans, and we also bring them to our museum so that they are familiarized with our museum setup and all that. So as part of this program, what happens is that then they will be able to use the traveling trunks to some of the materials you see here to conduct classes for preschoolers. We were quite lucky. After we introduced this project across the preschools, we actually submitted this project for an ICOM award. And in 2016, the ICOM's Committee for Education and Cultural Action actually gave this, awarded it with the Best Practice Award in 2016. But since then, we have actually reached out to about 117 preschools, hitting 4,000 preschoolers, and training a total of 236 preschool educators. But what we also did to expand its outreach, because this Singapore's Little Treasures program was only available in English for its first edition. And I think we received feedback from a lot of the preschools that could we have an edition in the mother tongue? So just to share with you, Singapore has a bilingual language policy. English is the main language of business, of commerce, of administration and all that. But our government makes sure that we have to learn our mother tongue. So as a Chinese, I have to learn Mandarin. And then as a Malay, you learn Malay. Then Indian, you learn Tamil. So because of this bilingual policy, I think a lot of preschools also adopted this policy. So they came back and told us that it would be great, you know, if you could have the mother tongue version of Singapore's Little Treasures. So what we did was, now we develop more kits, and they contain content in Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil. And what we did was we partnered our 3 heritage institutions, which target the 3 ethnic communities. We developed content based on their collection, so that as part of the lessons, the preschool teachers will also bring the preschool students to these institutions. So again, it's kind of a win-win arrangement. The teachers are very happy. They get additional and very different teaching resources. We are happy because they bring the numbers to our museums, okay, and they contribute to our overall museum visitorship. From preschools, we then move on to primary schools. This is a hard-fought battle. I'll be very honest. It took us a long while to convince the Ministry of Education to use our museums, to use the content in our museum as part of the national curriculum. And I think in 2014, we managed to convince our ministry to integrate our content into the school textbooks. So at the primary school level, what happens is that they are under social studies. They actually feature a total of 90 artifacts from the collection of the Asian Civilizations Museum. We were also very lucky because when we looked through the social studies syllabus, we realized that the focus was really about understanding your Asian neighbors. You know, so it's about understanding like where our forefathers came from, China, India, the Malay archipelago, and things like that. So it's just perfectly aligned with what the Asian Civilizations Museum's ambit was. And that was how we positioned it, and we actually managed to convince the MOE to integrate it into the textbooks of our primary 5 and primary 6 students. These are basically our higher primary school students. And subsequently, we also managed to actually include different collections from different museums into social studies syllabus almost across all our primary school levels. And that means now it's totally integrated with the national curriculum, national syllabus. And actually we find that that is very helpful because the textbooks will show you visuals, pictures, images, but then a lot of times during their school break or when there's an exam marking period where the teachers, when the students have more free time, a lot of them actually request to come to our museums to look at the actual physical artifact that's been featured in their textbooks. And then, of course, we also develop additional activity sheets that complements the social studies syllabus. So the kids will have things to do there other than just look at the artifacts. And we also managed to work with the Ministry of Education to integrate our content at the secondary school level. Secondary school levels would be, I guess, students from age 13 to 16, 16 being the age where they take their O levels. And we managed to get into the humanities curriculum, basically the history curriculum that's taught in schools. That would be the secondary 1 and secondary 2. How we did it was we developed something known as historical investigation. It would require the lower secondary school students to visit the National Museum of Singapore, where we tell the history of Singapore, where they will learn about pre-independence, World War II, post-independence, and things like that. Key milestones in Singapore's history, which are actually taught in the textbooks already, but when they go to the museums, they will learn more about like personal stories, personal anecdotes of our pioneers, people who lived, for instance, through World War II. They'll be able to look at some of the artifacts that we have collected and so on. The second strategy, other than integrating into the national syllabus of our Ministry of Education, what we did and what we found that was very important was that you really need to develop signature outreach and school programs, okay? And what we did was, for the primary school level, we came up with something known as Heritage Explorers Program. I did bring some copies of the booklet, but I think that's not enough for everyone. So some of you might have it in your bag. Basically, what this program does is that it asks you to it asks the primary school students to do role playing. So there are 5 roles that you can play. You can choose to be a curator, you can choose to be a historian, a designer, an educator, or a heritage ambassador. And for each of these roles, you just need to complete a series of simple tasks. Like for instance, if you're an educator, you can, one of your tasks could be talk about traditional games in Singapore, and then you do a simple instruction sheet on how to play these games. Once you have completed it, all you need to do is to show it to your teacher, get it certified, and then you will be awarded the badge. So you see at the bottom page, there's like 5 badges. So it depends on you. You want to do a task that's related, you complete a task related as a historian, you get the historian badge. Okay, so there are 5 badges to collect. Right now, because we introduced it recently, we have reached out to 70 schools. We hope to roll it out to all primary schools eventually. I think there are about 150 or so, 168 primary schools in Singapore. So we have reached out to 70 schools and more than 36,000 students. Again, every time we do one program, we roll it out and we have quite okay results. We will submit it to the ICOM, Committee for Education and Cultural Action. And then we are very lucky that this year they decided to give us another Best Practice Award for the Heritage Explorers program. This is another signature program that we do. It's called Heritage Corners. We are trying to encourage all the schools, as many schools as possible, to set up Heritage Corners that documents and commemorates the school's history, when it was set up, who are the famous people who actually went through their school halls, and then of course to actually document the history of the estate where the estate or the neighborhood where the school is located. What we do is we provide once-off funding support. So we support up to 50% of the heritage corner of the school, and it's capped at about Singapore $50,000 every school. Right, so we give them funding support, but at the same time, we also give them a lot of consultancy advice, because a lot of them don't know how to set up a heritage gallery and so on. So we do adopt quite a hands-on approach, going down to the school to teach them how to set up these corners. So far, we have 62 schools which have these heritage corners and 62 schools which have received funding support. So see the breakdown below. These are just some examples, some visuals of the more successful heritage corners that are developed by our primary and secondary schools. I must honestly confess that they have exceeded our expectations. We typically expect just a normal a heritage wall or a room with panel tags, you know, and some I guess memorabilia like school badges, school uniforms, and all that. But these schools have really moved beyond, and you can see the way it's designed. It's actually quite sophisticated, and they do have a lot of artifacts. They will call out to their school alumni, asking them to come back, contribute artifacts, contribute pictures, and so on. Townsville Primary School is very impressive as well. But I think the more successful examples actually show how the schools can actually leverage on these heritage corners as part of their teaching curriculum. So some of them would have a World War II corner and things like that, but they make sure that every of their student actually use or visit these heritage galleries. If they have lesson plans planned after that involves a visit to these galleries. And what's also quite interesting is that all the schools that we have supported, they actually encourage the training of their students as gallery docents or gallery guides. So these students actually will learn additional skills like public speaking, how to write a tour script and things like that. So it helps to enrich, I guess, the students' education. Something that's rather similar to the Heritage Corners program is our Heritage Trail Adoption program. NHB has developed a total of 17 heritage trails island-wide. So what these heritage trails entail, basically we put a marker, something like these, okay, at significant landmarks or significant sites across the island, depending on where we are focusing on right now. So we have 17 of these heritage trails. What we thought that what we wanted to do is to make sure that people actually go on these trails. So we look for schools that are located where the heritage trails are. We actually offered to train their students, train their teachers. So we provide them with all the learning resources, we conduct workshops, we teach them on how to do guided tours. Then the schools will adopt these trails and they'll conduct them for their peers. So the students conduct them for their peers. It's part of their learning journeys. On certain days, they will also conduct for residents living around the school. So again, it's a win-win kind of collaboration. Right now, the program has been adopted by 26 schools, and I think about 1,000 students have been trained by us as trail guides. This is an extension of the Heritage Explorers program, but it targets the secondary schools. And what we did was we worked with all the uniform groups, because for some reason the uniform groups likes to collect badges that they can then pin on their uniforms, like, you know, that's the National Cadet Corps or our police youth equivalent. I think the one above is our Girl Guides. So what we did was we worked out a program where they have to complete a number of tasks, any one task. They can do a research project, they can come up with some kind of a trail, they can do a documentary, and it can be either an individual effort or a team effort. Once that's done, they can actually be eligible for these National Heritage Badge that we give out. And this badge is given to about 3,000 students every year since its introduction. We are looking at a possible revamp of this program to see how, you know, based on feedback that we get from the uniform groups. And other than reaching out to signature outreach programs, I think what we also want to do is also to bring the students back in to our museums. We also want to bring them back into our heritage institutions, and more importantly, we want them to be our youth ambassadors, you know, so they can go out and tell their peers, like, oh, I did guiding at this place, do you know that they have these interesting artifacts and things like that. So what we did was, we started working with particular schools to train them as docents for our permanent galleries as well as our special exhibitions. So every time we have a special exhibition, we feature the kids. And it's also because, I guess, The picture above is actually our Prime Minister. The picture below features our Minister of Culture. We find that our political appointees are particularly happy when they go to an exhibition and then they're greeted with a lot of kids who will show them around and things like that, you know. So that's one of the reasons we have them also. There's a lot of training involved. Our curators have to actually sit down with the teachers, with the students, to actually go through the content, what are the key points, and then after that we have to coach them on what to say, you know, and all that. There'll be a few trial runs, and then before we actually let them go out and conduct all these guided tours. Right now, I think we have partnered more than 20 schools, and we have about 1,284 student docents in total. Here's a breakdown in terms of the number of students trained, the number of schools. The total number of schools would add up to more than 20, but that's because some schools actually volunteer to be docents of different institutions. So we don't double count them. We count them by per school, right? And if the schools are even more ambitious, they don't just want to be docents and, you know, they want to be curators, then we will work with them. But this honestly is even more labor intensive, more resource intensive on the museum team, especially the curators, because you have to work with them right from the start. They actually will do research work together with our curators to put together the exhibition. So it's really all the way step-by-step guidance. They do research work. We will involve them in the design of the exhibitions, and that's why these are mainly traveling exhibitions that go out, not so much the permanent galleries. So they will also work with us on the design, as I said, and then subsequently they are also trained to be docents. So this is an even more comprehensive program, and that's why thus far we have only worked with 8 schools, but we have presented 11 traveling exhibitions. This is something that we sort of copied from a rather popular program, I think in England and Wales. It's called, I think it's called Takeover Day, and it happens in November. In the example in the UK and Wales, the youth will actually be partnered with museum professionals, and then they'll be given a glimpse of what is it like to be working in a museum. So for this particular program, what we did was we allowed them to take over the running of our museum almost totally, with some supervision, very minimal. So they will take care of visitor services, you know, over an open house weekend, for instance. So they have to answer questions like where's the toilet, where's the gallery, what time is the program. So they have to do this. They also have to develop programs and be facilitators for these programs. And they are mainly child-related arts and crafts program. And it's totally done by the youth. We have not received a single complaint about this program, you know, despite initial concerns, because I think once they know that it's actually done by youths, expectations are lower. You know, they do not expect like very professionally run arts and crafts workshop and all that. But it also gives the youths good exposure to what work or life in the museum is all about, right? And as I think Anna mentioned, the importance of storytelling. So I thought since it's covered by Anna, I won't go into detail, but basically just to say that we do have a lot of dramatized storytelling tours that takes place in the heritage institutions. So for instance, like certain characters that are featured in our permanent galleries will come alive. You know, it could be some Indian pioneer, you know, some character and things like that. And then they will engage the students. They will tell students stories from their perspective, historically research, of course. I mean, yeah. So our curators will work with them to develop the dramatized story content, and then the actors will act them out, you know, and involve the students in a lot of the activities. But I guess beyond just developing programs, beyond integrating with the national education syllabus, we personally find that it's very important to to ensure that these programs and all our efforts are sustainable in the long term. You know, that they that they can carry on by themselves, and that's why we focus a lot on capability development of the sector. So since we are talking about education here, we focus a lot on developing and deepening the capabilities of, let's say, teachers, of educators, and we do that by training. Every program that we roll out and every program that I've shared with you, there is a training workshop component where teachers or schools who want to sign on to the programs, they have to be trained. Okay, and then after that they will go back, they will train their fellow teachers and all that. And right now we have already about 500 teachers trained to actually help us roll out our programs. And honestly, this is also because it's a very practical reason. Across the entire National Heritage Board, if I remember correctly, we only have a total of 18 educators. There's no way we can do all the training, all the education programs that we have done if we did not have support from all these trained teachers, okay? And we also provide training resources. This is our latest guidebook. And it's for heritage educators. Because it's very big, I could only bring a few of them and I've given to the organizers. If you want a copy, you can approach me, I can mail it to you. It teaches educators or teachers on how to actually set up a heritage corner. Because when we roll out the program, we find that we get so many calls, we're inundated with calls about how to set it up, how much fund can they apply for, what does the fund cover, and things like that. So we give them a step-by-step guide, how you develop a heritage trail, a heritage corner. And again, because of the popularity of our heritage trails, we also get a lot of queries from schools. They want to develop one around their school and all that. So we teach them step-by-step how you do something like that. And we have distributed this resource kit to all 370 schools, primary and secondary schools in Singapore. So hopefully they will refer to this, they will use this kit to actually develop their own trails and heritage corners. And for tertiary institutions, what we do is we actually sign MOUs with them. Okay, we sign MOUs. We have, these are the 4 tertiary institutions that we have MOUs with. We actually co-develop the content of heritage or museum-related electives with them. We co-teach these modules, these electives for them. We actually co-assess and give and actually co-mark, the project proposals that come out from these electives. And I think there is initially, when we started out, it was mainly practical, it was mainly theory-based. So you submit a research paper, a proposal that's either related to the museums or heritage sector, but subsequently we moved on to include a practicum aspect to it. So they have to complete certain projects and be graded based on these projects. And these are still ongoing. And we find that actually, they are actually very good because they would actually come back to help us out on certain things because I think it comprises part of their grades. So like for the ITE school, they are very enthusiastic about youth takeover program because they are graded. Then the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, they do guided tours for us, and those are a lot of the dramatized tours. So these are just some of the figures. And this is an example which I always love to share, but it's about how we actually train the first batch of students from the Nanyang Technological University's Hospitality and Tourism Management class. They approached us, they were inspired by, I think, an example in the UK where guides would actually just conduct free guided tours for members of the public. You don't have to register, you just turn up at the designated guided spots and then you can just join the tour. So what they did was they approached us, they wanted to do guided, they are called Singapore Footprints or Walkaholics, so they have 2 names. Basically, they conduct free guided tours of the Singapore River, Chinatown, and the Arts and Civic District. And what we did, honestly, was we only trained the first batch of students. This started in 2012. We only trained the first batch of pioneer students. We provided them with minimal funding where they just, to actually come up with all these polo shirts so that they can identify themselves with the public. We provided them with pictures, we provided them with historical research. We just vet the content for historical accuracy and all that, and off they go. And then subsequently, we didn't have to train the next batch and all that. They trained the batches themselves. So it's a good example of sustainable engagement, but it has a sad ending because I think the NTU ended this particular module. So in 2017, I think March, they conducted their last tour, but they have been conducting regular free tours for visitors, for Singaporeans since 2012. So this is an example of sustainable engagement. And with that, I've come towards the last 2 slides of my presentation. Basically, I thought it would be useful to sum up some of the key learning points that we learned after introducing and prototyping quite a number of these museum and heritage education-related programs. We find that to get the buy-in, to get the schools to send school groups to the museums, you really have to be aligned or be part of the school curriculum. Otherwise, I think it's really, really difficult. It's also important, as I mentioned, to partner and train the teachers and educators so that you just need someone at your museum from an operational point of view to receive these school groups, to schedule when they come in. You don't have to be the actual person to conduct the entire tour. Otherwise, it's very draining for our educators to be doing tour after tour after tour. So we empower the teachers, we train them to be able to conduct their own tours, and we also provide them with all the resources that they need. If they require briefings, if they require activity sheets, if they require funding support, we'll try our best to give it to them. But there are also challenges that we faced from introducing all these programs. The first one, I think it's quite common to all museums that have all these educational programs that they try and roll out. We are quite ambitious. For primary schools, we have already hit 50% of all primary schools. By 2018, we hope that about 75% of all primary schools in Singapore will visit one of our museums. But with that, we have to balance it with our museum's ability to absorb or to handle all these increased school visits, because unlike the Philippines, we were unable to get anywhere near a headcount increase of 230 Anna? No way. Our Ministry of Finance is very strict. They do not give headcounts. So we find it quite difficult to justify for additional headcounts or additional manpower to handle, for instance, something like increased school visits. We try to get around the problem by scheduling school visits outside of official museum opening hours. So let's say if our museum opens at 10, by 9 or something, we would be asking the schools to come. And they appreciate it because when they come to the museum, there are no visitors, so they are able to conduct their lessons in relative peace, and the kids will be running around making a lot of noise, which actually brings me to a related challenge, which is the last one. We find that when there's a huge number of school groups in our museums, they tend to be very, very noisy. They get very excited, they get very noisy, they scream, they run, they shout, they play hide and seek. And the problem with that is that for non-school visitors, it's very annoying because here you are trying to, be cultured and read something about a particular artifact, and then you have a screaming kid that's just running around you, knocking into you. So we have to balance things like that. But generally, I think the general public, when they see school visits, they sort of quietly move to another gallery while the kids are around in that particular gallery. So far it's been okay. The other challenge we find that it is still, despite being integrated with our Ministry of Education's national syllabus, it's still very difficult to make it mandatory, which is to make it compulsory for all the schools to visit one of our museums. And it's because, I guess, if you are a student studying in Singapore, there's just so much competing demands from the different ministries and agencies. Like the Ministry of Defense will want them to visit their army camp as part of nation building, security, and things like that. Then the Science Center will want them to visit for some other reasons. So there are many, many competing demands, and our poor students only have so much time, right? And they need to take a break from school and all that. So these are the competing demands. And finally, one thing we find that is also very important, and how we were able to manage all these programs, is that we recruited former teachers who are familiar with the teaching curriculum, teachers who are familiar with MOEs, what they want to achieve, the broader plans and all that. And that's how we could develop programs that were subsequently aligned. if they are not former teachers, they won't know what are some of the operational considerations that you have to think about when you develop a educational program for museum. And that's really helpful. And of course, it would be a bonus if they were up to date with some of the new pedagogy that in the field of education. For us, we generally adopt the inquiry-based approach. Okay, so with that, I've come to the end of my presentation with 2 minutes to spare. I'll just show you a brief video of which sums up all the initiatives that I've shared. We hope to provide heritage touchpoints for students throughout their educational journey, from preschool to primary school to secondary school. And we also hope to make encounters with heritage enjoyable and experiential for all students, so as to instill an interest in heritage at an early age, and in doing so to cultivate the next generation of heritage champions.
This trail has definitely opened up my eyes in terms of understanding Little India and the Indian heritage by itself.
Our initiatives add value to schools because they are well integrated with the school curriculum, and they actually complement existing subjects such as history and social studies.
It exposes students with new skills like public speaking skills, research skills, organization skills, and also how they relate to people in the public.
The feedback we have received from schools thus far has been overwhelmingly positive. From teachers, they are appreciative of the resources and the training tools that have been provided by NHB. For students, they enjoy the visits to our museums and going on heritage trails, and also picking up interesting facts about Singapore's heritage. As a result, more and more schools are now approaching NHB to participate in our heritage education initiatives. To date, almost half of the schools in Singapore are our partners, and we hope to reach out to all schools in Singapore in the years to come.
It is amazing, very creative, fascinating, fun, awesome.
Okay, thank you. We didn't force the students to say those things. We recorded them at the end of the sessions, to get their more candid responses. Okay, I guess now I'll open the floor out to questions. Any questions that you have, I'll try my best to answer them. Any questions from the floor? It's okay, right? I can just ask them directly.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You can run the session.
Oh, thank you. I just can't do the Thai
It's okay.
translation. Yeah. Okay, does anyone from the floor has any questions that you'd like to ask about any of our programs or anything that I've shared? If there are no questions, does that mean that we can break for lunch earlier?
There.
Oh, dress. Okay, so yeah.
Okay, first, thank you very much for sharing your wonderful heritage program. So my question is, how do you scale up the program? When you are doing the program with 10 school or 20 school, it seems that it is manageable. But then when you scale up to 100 school and 1,000 school, then how do you handle that? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, that's a great question. That's something that we're grappling with at NHB. What we usually do is we prototype with a few schools first because they're manageable. Then based on their feedback and based on all the operational issues that we observe while doing these programs, we enhance these programs. The next step is, as you mentioned, how do we scale up? What we do is we will train the teachers of the schools. So the schools come in as active partners. We do not go in and run these programs for them. If we do that, we will not be able to scale up. So, but if the schools decide to come in, there's a commitment on their part to allow us to train the teachers. Once we train the teachers actually run these programs. So that's one way of scaling up. The other way of scaling up is a more practical one, which is we outsource. We outsource how we conduct these programs. There are a few so-called good museum education vendors in Singapore, operating in Singapore that offer school-related programs. We train them and they provide the training on our behalf. So two ways. One is that the school come in as equal partners. We train teachers, they run it for us. The other is that we outsource some of the training and some of the these programs to educational vendors. And in a sense, we help to grow the ecosystem because I think these vendors also need opportunities, jobs, and all that to be able to grow. Yeah, so these are the two ways we scale up. The third way, which we wish for, but which we never get, is to get additional headcount and funding from our Ministry of Finance. Yeah, but maybe in a good year, like if we are celebrating like Singapore's 100th birthday or something like that, they might be more generous, then they'll give us money. Yeah, but yeah, okay. Yep.
Hi. Thank you for sharing your amazing programs. I have questions about evaluation. How do you evaluate or how do you design evaluation framework?
So for each of our program, there's a feedback form that I think participants and teachers have to fill up. Whether the program has reached its objectives, so the objectives will be stated up front. What have they learned? Will they recommend the programs to their peers and things like that? So at the end of each run, we consolidate all the feedback, we look at it. So if the feedback is positive and that this program has been beneficial, for instance, in meeting its objectives of, for example, increasing awareness about particular aspects of Singapore's heritage, we will continue running it. So we do collect surveys, we do collect feedback form. Actually, we have no choice, we have to do it. It's part of our KPIs. Yeah, we don't run programs and just count number of students. We have to count the effectiveness of these programs. Our ministry is quite strict. We also have to count quality engagement. You know, are you engaged when you do these activities and things like that? So we collect all these statistics. We go back to the ministry and they give us, let's say, funding for the next operating year. Thank you.
I have no question, but I would like to congratulate Singapore for doing such great job in museum and education. I was lucky enough to be a research fellow at ACM for 3 months, and I was a storyteller in residence for 3 months, and I have seen all that you have said that is very true and very effective. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you for helping out at ACM. We always need volunteers like docents, storytellers, and all that. And we're very lucky. We do have a pool of museum volunteers who actually guide on a regular basis, which helps to relieve pressure on our staff, like our curators and our researchers, for doing guiding work. Thank you.
Okay. มีด้านบนคิดว่าน่าจะเป็นท่านสุดท้ายนะครับเพราะกำลังจะเที่ยงแล้ว
Hello. Okay. My question is, how do you make every partner in this chain to believe the same core value that museum education is important and want to engage? Thank you.
Okay. Actually, we do the opposite. We find out what matters to them first. What kind of objectives they have to meet, what kind of values we are supposed to inculcate, for instance, in the students. And then we will program it such that we will do it in such a way that our programs actually help to meet, for instance, the schools or the Ministry of Education's broader objectives. We show how they are aligned rather than try and convince them, because sometimes it's quite difficult. As teachers, they often fed back to us that they have many competing demands on their time. You know, the last thing they want to do is to think of how our museum or heritage programs actually contribute back to the school. But if you show them right at the onset that it's perfectly aligned and that it actually is an extension of, let's say, the social studies syllabus, you find that a lot of the initial resistance that you expect would not be there, because they are actually quite happy that, you know, to have all these additional training resources, additional places to go to as part of their learning journeys. So we actually do the opposite. We make sure our programs are aligned with theirs first. Yeah, without sacrificing what was the original intention of all these museum and heritage programs, which is basically to increase public access to our national collection and to get, let's say, the students more, to make them more aware of and more appreciative of certain aspects of our history. Okay, I hope that answers.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we don't have any longer time for this session because it's noon already. So thank you very much, Alvin Tan, for your terrific presentation.
Thank you.
So please give hands to Alvin Tan. Thank you so much. Thank you. ก็เมื่อกี้มีคำถามผมอาจจะแปลสรุปคำถามนิดหนึ่งนะสำหรับท่านที่อาจจะยังฟังไม่ทันผมก็ฟังสรุปนะคำถามแรกถามถึงลืมเลยฮะถามว่าที่ทำงานกับโรงเรียนขยายขนาดแบบว่าเพิ่มปริมาณการทำงานโรงเรียนเป็นร้อยโรงเรียนได้อย่างไรนะครับเขาก็ตอบว่าก็ทำงานคือไม่ได้ทำเองโดยตรงนะครับก็คือทำฝึกอบรมครูในโรงเรียนเพื่อให้ครูสามารถทำโครงการเหล่านี้ได้เองรวมทั้งอีกวิธีหนึ่งก็คือใช้การ outsource คือเทรนให้องค์กรที่เป็นองค์กรภายนอกไปเทรนครูอีกทีอันนี้คำตอบคร่าวๆนะครับคำตอบสรุปนะครับและท่านที่2ถามถึงเรื่องการประเมินผลเขาก็ตอบรวมๆว่าก็คือมีการทำเซอร์เวย์เพื่อดูฟีดแบ็กของผู้ที่ใช้บริการของนักเรียนของคนที่เกี่ยวข้องนะครับส่วนท่านที่3ก็แสดงความยินดีกับงานพิพิธภัณฑ์ในสิงคโปร์นะครับว่าสามารถดำเนินงานมาได้ถึงขนาดนี้นะครับถึงก้าวหน้าขนาดนี้ส่วนท่านที่4ถามถึงเรื่องทำงานร่วมกับพาร์ทเนอร์ยังไงว่าให้เขาเข้ามาร่วมงานด้วยผู้ที่เกี่ยวข้องเนี่ยเขาก็ตอบว่าทำในแง่ที่ว่าคือไม่ได้ไปคอนวินส์ให้เขาเชื่อแต่ว่าทำเพื่อตอบจริงๆทำพาร์ทเนอร์แต่ละพาร์ทเนอร์เขาจะถามว่าแต่ละสมมติโรงเรียนเงี้ยมีเป้าหมายมีอะไรยังไงแล้วเขาก็จะชี้เห็นว่างานของเขาที่เขาทำเนี่ยมันไปตอบโจทย์หรือตอบวัตถุประสงค์ของโรงเรียนยังไงอันนี้เป็นต้นนะฮะก็คืออันนี้คือวิธีการที่เขาทำงานขยายพาร์ทเนอร์ออกไปเนี่ยนะครับก็ขอบคุณทุกท่านนะครับที่ร่วมรับฟังและแสดงความคิดเห็นและตั้งคำถามในเช้าวันนี้นะครับเดี๋ยวเราจะไปรับประทานอาหารเที่ยงกันนะครับที่ห้องที่รับประทานกาแฟเมื่อสักครู่เนี่ยนะครับแต่ว่าก่อนจะแยกย้ายกันไปรับประทานอาหารนะครับผมขอประชาสัมพันธ์นิดนึงครับว่าตรงโถงที่ชั้น5เนี่ยนะครับเราจะเราจะอยากจะเชิญชวนทุกท่านนะครับมีส่วนร่วมในพิธีปิดในวันพรุ่งนี้นะครับพรุ่งนี้เราจะมีแถลงการของงานนะครับแล้วก็มีพิธีปิดซึ่งทุกท่านสามารถมีส่วนร่วมได้ด้วยการเขียนเราจะมีโพสต์อิทให้เขียนหรือจริงๆเรามีทีมถ่ายทำวิดีโอด้วยนะครับถ้าท่านยินดีที่จะพูดต่อหน้ากล้องแล้วเราก็จะเอามานำมาใช้ในการในพิธีปิดพวกนี้ด้วยนะครับแสดงความเห็นหรือความคิดต่อเรื่องการจัดการศึกษาในพิพิธภัณฑ์นะครับก็จะยินดีมากนะครับขอเรียนเชิญนะครับถ้าสะดวกช่วงเวลาไหนก็ไปตรงที่โถงได้เลยนะครับดังนั้นก็ถึงเวลารับประทานอาหารเที่ยงแล้วนะครับก็ขอเรียนเชิญครับแล้วก็ในช่วงบ่ายก็จะมีห้องย่อยต่างๆตามที่ระบุอยู่ในเอกสารที่แจกไว้นะครับก็ขอให้มีความสุขกับการรับประทานอาหารนะครับแล้วก็พบกันช่วงบ่ายครับขอบคุณครับ